All right, let's record. I'm here again with Grace. Thanks so much for taking the time to talk with me again.
Yeah,
Always,
likewise.
always feel like I learn so much when I talk with you and continuing hopefully towards my dream of working together on something sometime.
Cool. Thank you. So, yeah, we'll talk about that, I'm sure, at some point when there's something to work on. So, want to thank you as well because these talks do have reach. And at least three people have spoken to me since we last spoke, which only was a week ago, right? And said they saw the talk, that they liked the talk, that they learned something from the talk. So that's also the background of why it's always worth speaking to you because you have really amazing reach to people and respect in the industry. And when we talk, then it ripples out. Speaking of bubbles, which is what we're going to talk about today, droplets, bubbles, whatever you want to call that.
It's Thank you. To be honest, this is a new experience for me. So actually, it's the first person who said that to me, I think. I know I've been actively working hard to build it, but I've never actually had somebody frame it and notice it that way. And yeah, and I do hope to continue building it, especially in terms of yeah, my goal is to connect. So if three people reached out of the conversation, I think that's more than worth it. And then others are watching it. So
For
yeah,
sure.
always excited when can build connections. So today we get to learn about bubbles. It's been sitting with me. I know it's not the official project name. Maybe it'll just become the unofficial. And then you can have Bubbles AI. And who wouldn't want to talk to Bubbles AI?
A
Uh,
lot of people. We could go down the AI path. It's really interesting. I had a conversation. I just want to mention it this week. This is not on the bubbles topic. I was speaking to somebody yesterday and it suddenly struck me and I said it out loud and they agreed. We have created the paperclip optimizer, right? You know the paperclip optimizer problem with AI?
Of course, but the I thought the consumer capitalism was the paperclip optimizer.
It could be the consumer capitalism, but certainly AI has become that because if you look at how these data centers are being built and literally killing people, both Bitcoin miners and there was recently this article about Memphis being taken over by Grok's data centers, and people are literally getting sick and dying. And so we actually have created the paperclip optimizer with AI, and I just want to spread the word that we're there. I just want to spread the word we're there. And you can say what you want about the future and it's going to save us or it isn't going to save us, and there's great uses for it. But we have reached paperclip optimizer velocity. So I just want to say that part out loud. And I'm happy to argue with people about that, but it's not an exact, precise definition, but it looks that way. It's really interesting.
I mean, when we turned forests into toilet paper, there is, I think, many paperclip
Yeah,
optimizers.
there are many of them, aren't there?
But
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about bubbles
let's talk about bubbles.
because there
Maybe
is a
start.
right? That's some context. So the first context about bubbles, it's called Verifiable Community officially, but who knows? We may change the name to Bubbles. People like it a lot. Maybe it's Community Bubbles. This all starts from, and one of the reasons that you and I are sort of in this group together, is it a group, right? How do you know? Is Ostrom's principles. We talk about Ostrom's principles, and the first one is that we need to have clearly defined boundaries. That is, we need to know who's in the bubble and who's out of the bubble. So you and I are in multiple bubbles at any given time, multiple communities, right? It might be a religious community and it might be a particular tribe. It says gathering, the gathering of the tribes, right? It might be one tribe. It might be that that tribe is part of a group of tribes. It might be your neighborhood where you live, your family. We all belong to multiple different communities simultaneously. And that's sort of what I'm referring to in bubbles. Bubbles helps you visualize the fact that you've got these multiple overlapping alliances or commitments, you could call them, or identities. Now, without a membrane without knowing who's in or who's out of your club, I'm just going to call it club, it's very difficult to implement any of the other Ostrom principles. You can't have, and that's why when you signed a conflict resolution thing, if you sign a contract, it will always say this contract will be settled in this jurisdiction. Because without that, the contract's worthless. So it refers to the membrane that you're in. Most of us, not all of us, most people, I would say there's maybe 10% of the people who don't fall into this category, 10 to 15%. Most people have a government issued identification. And that identification or identification documentation is a way of signifying the jurisdiction that this person belongs to. Now, when you accept or are assigned a government issued ID, you are also accepting a whole lot of terms that can be randomly changed in various ways. As we know, governments change, laws change, all kinds of things change. And by accepting a government ID or holding a government ID, you're subject to those problems and those privileges and those rights and those responsibilities, whatever they may look like in your jurisdiction. And there's a big talk right now in the UK about digital ID. You may have noticed. The government's talking about giving a digital ID to people. The way that that conversation is being held is quite ignorant, because civil rights advocates tell you that you really need to resist this. However, what they don't say is that already you're holding at least one and probably two digital IDs, maybe more. And the digital ID you're probably already holding is given to you by Google or Facebook, or both, if you have both. So every time you log in with Google, you are giving Google the right to identify, have your identity information, and give you that identity. Does that make sense to you? And this is the worst kind of digital ID in some ways that you can have, because these people are basically changing your mind. They're taking your data, they're manipulating your activities, they're manipulating democracies, they're manipulating all kinds of things, getting you to buy more stuff, getting whatever it is. And you have no control of it, you have no transparency into it, and you didn't elect Google. From that perspective, you might say something like, an identification document given by the British government might be better than an identification given by Google. It might be worse, but to pretend that we don't have digital ID, that we don't have full surveillance capitalism right now, and go around, saying just say no to Keir Starmer is kind of a delusional perspective. So that's the first way, right? Because we're already trapped inside these systems. And your biometrics are held if you've got a passport, so you've got sort of digital biometrics somewhere. And also, by the way, just for information's sake, for people who want to talk about this, they should probably talk to Kalia Young, because she's the expert. I work with her on the bubbles. So her name's Kalia Young, Identity Woman. So anybody who wants to talk about this deeper in their podcast. There actually are three forms of digital identity that are relevant to the British public, but nobody talks about these. It's like they're three different things, but people are talking about it like it's this one thing. And if we just say no, it's going to be the right way to go. And so that's at least three different things issued by the British government, plus your passport which is issued by an international authority, plus all of the Google and Facebook stuff. So we already are kind of trapped under a variety of identity regimes, you could say. Identity can be done right, it can be done wrong. There's different ways, and there's different ways of thinking about the interoperability. Bubbles is a way of thinking about digital ID a little bit differently. Digital identity it's more than this, but there are two main components. One is the identity number, which is like I can say I'm Grace, right? That's my name or my identifier. You have a digital identifier, it's called DID, and that's like saying I'm Grace. Now, it turns out I'm not. You may or may not know. I just call myself that, but I do not have any government issued documents that say that that is my name.
By the
Okay.
way, Vorski is also not my legal name.
Okay. There you go. So we have identifiers that we present ourselves There's some people in the world, there are only two of them, by the way, but there are people in the world who call me mom. And that is their identifier vis-a-vis me. They just call me mom. And right, so we have different, you could have multiple different digital identifiers because Google calls you one number and Facebook calls you another number, DID. That's called digital identifier, just like some people call me mom, some people call me Grace, some people call me auntie. It's just one of those things. The second element is called verifiable credentials. Verifiable credentials is a credential. Well, that's obvious. I have a driver's license. It's kind of a government issued ID. In many places, it's considered a government issued ID, but the purpose of it is not to issue me an identity. And I can't cross a border with it in most cases. Within the Schengen zone, yes, maybe. But even within the Schengen zone, my driver's license is not valid for that. Only my government issued ID is valid for that, and only a permanent residency ID, not a temporary residency. My driver's license is a credential issued giving me specific rights. It gives me the right to drive a car anywhere in the world. So it's a different type of thing, and that's a credential. My college degree might be a credential. These credentials identify other things. So a person can hold multiple credentials, and they can hold them in what we call a wallet. Hold my driver's license and my identity cards in a wallet in the physical world. And that's why we call identity wallets, because you could hold a number of different credentials in them. So that is the structure of identity. And it's important to understand that. When we look at how the blockchain is trying to do reputation and identity, they are quite delusional about what makes up identity in some ways and ignoring
I
the
told you, by the way, my trauma,
standards.
not being able to verify I'm a human. I had coins, some random coins. I wanted to give them to my friend's quadratic funding, and I couldn't verify I'm a human.
Were you using
I went through hoops. My friend sat next to me. We spent half hour on it and gave up. I'm on LinkedIn. I have a GitHub account. I have all of, but no, I didn't verify that
Oh, yeah, I
I'm
know
able
what
to
you're
be
using.
human.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and this is really crazy, right? And I had a similar situation in blockchain where I did public goods funding with a Git with Gitcoin, and I brought in some new friends. And what I didn't know is they would only be considered as human, not just based on the things you said, but based on the fact that they gave money to more than one project. So imagine I'm telling my friends, would you like to donate to my project? And by the way, you have to donate to somebody else's project too. It's really random. And so I didn't tell them that. I didn't know that. And they were all my new friends, new users to the Gitcoin platform were considered Sybil attackers. And I didn't get and like Benjamin Life, just bless him, he fought for me to get that money. And the Gitcoin people said no. And so I didn't get my matching funds. I got a smaller amount of matching funds than I should have because those my new users were considered Sybil attackers,
So,
which is like,
so
wow, that's crazy, right?
okay, I don't feel so bad anymore. But if you can't verify that you're a real person and you're deep in this space, this is clearly a system that doesn't work for a high percentage of people.
So proof of personhood or probability, I'm going to call it probability of personhood. That's what we're talking about, right? There's like, how do I algorithmically give a high probability, not proof, probability that somebody's a person? That is one form of identity. That's important. Um, it's specific though. It's like, I just want to make sure this is a person, right? Then it's, I want to make sure this is a unique person, that they aren't voting twice. That's a second type of probability of unique personhood, right? That's a different type of identity in the blockchain world. And this is all we're trying to do this algorithmically and we're failing because AI is so bad. So I want to prove it. So some kinds of proof of probability of personhood, probability that you are the person you say you are, probability of unique personhood. And then there's, are you the person you say you are? Right? Like if somebody invites me, if I apply to speak somewhere like here, you want to know it's actually me and that I'm qualified to speak about this thing. You might not care, for example, that my real name is Grace. You don't care, in fact. You don't care that I'm the legal entity Grace. You care that I'm the DAO expert Grace. And so these are all different ways of thinking about proving that the person that is in front of you is a person. Bubbles is a very different perspective. Bubbles is a non-individualistic perspective. Bubbles is a bubble perspective, a group perspective. And Bubbles said, because what is reputation? It changes all the time. I mean, I'm not the same person before a meal and after a meal, much less, when I show up at a business meeting or I
Yes,
show
and
up,
I'm
right?
sure the two humans that call you mom have a very different reputational and
Com
trust relationship, also varying week by week, right?
Yeah, completely. Look, I mean, look, I've got this card here testifying to the fact that I'm replacing them with cats. Anyway, so they have a very different perspective, or that I'm Wonder Woman. They gave me that one too. So they have a very specific perspective of who I am, of course. And there they are in that picture. Anyway, so that's right. So my reputation depends on which bubble I'm representing, which community I'm representing. If I go in there as a representative, I'm one of the writers of a biodiversity methodology, and I was representing this biodiversity crediting or indigenous organization at Davos. And, I wore a suit. I was at Davos. I wore a suit every day. So, and I had to represent them in front of rich investors. I look different. I act different. I speak different. Yeah. So my reputation actually is in some way very much associated with the community that I'm representing at that moment in time, as well as how much coffee I drank. And what the verifiable community does is that it systematizes that. And what that means is that I would go with a credential. So this started with I went to the first Regens Unite, or maybe it was the second Regens Unite get together. And I just asked a simple question. What do you mean by unite? Right? What do you mean by unite? What do you mean by getting together? What do you mean by group action? How do we know we're in the group, right? Because if you think about Regens Unite, the whole idea is we're going to bring multiple different communities, bubbles, together under within a certain bubble. Or maybe we're not going to bring everybody all the time because this group is only interested in water quality and that group is interested in agriculture and that group. So these things are always, again, the bubble analogy works. They're reforming and differently forming depending on what the particular thing is. And so the idea of identifying with bubbles allows for reconfiguration, constant reconfiguration. Uh, Another really interesting thing about this, I'm helping edit a book right now that Kevin Owocki just wrote. And he asked me to sort of just do a quick edit before his team asked me to do that before he goes to
But
DevCon.
wait, Kevin Ovotsky?
Milwaukee,
Yeah,
Milwaukee.
that's how it's. Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to
Uh,
do it. But isn't he the Gitcoin guy? So you're editing his book, but he couldn't do your thing?
what thing?
Isn't he behind?
I don't know. He's behind Gitcoin, but I doubt that he's the only one making those decisions, right? There's a bunch
Yeah,
of algorithm people and whatever.
see,
And I don't,
because
it's like, no, I don't take it personally. Like, let's not get personal, right?
no,
We
no,
are
no,
a
no, no.
small community and I
Of
really,
course, it's not personal. But
no,
I
no,
was
no.
just also trying to confirm in my mind it is the
Yeah,
same
yeah, yeah.
person.
Same Milwaukee, right? Same Milwaukee. Yeah, yeah. This is his first book, and he's coming out with another one, which is that he'll be giving out at DevCon
Okay,
in
Capital.
next month. So if you're interested,
I have
it's really interesting.
I have the green pilled book,
I
which
don't have that one. Yeah. So,
I
yeah.
can send
Anyway,
you.
shameless plug for, Milwaukee, or whatever it is. But in this book, he's talking about the networked firm. He's talking about the idea that because we have all of these technological advancements, what an organization looks like is shifting because we can formulate these pods or these what I'm calling bubbles. You could call them pods, you could call them individuals, you could call them coordinated groups, communities. We can reformulate them into different things. And you see that, right? You might outsource something to a marketing agency, or you might outsource your smart contract validation to a third party validator. And all these things are becoming so that this thing called an organization or organism can constantly mutate. To do that, you need trust. You need scalable trust. And again, that's what the bubbles are about. So if I'm inside of an organization in our regenerative communities, I might be inside an organization called Extinction Rebellion, and I might belong to a particular pod. And that pod can identify all the members of the pod and give them a credential, not a did, not an identity. They're all going to call me Grace, but a credential that says I'm in this pod. And it means I can keep a secret, right? It means I came to the actions and I can keep a secret. That's what it means to be a member. And they vouch for me that I can keep a secret. So no longer is my reputation something hanging there, dangling in the air, and I had a bad day or, something, and then all of a sudden I'm not the person you expected me to be. But it's actually held in place by a group. And you can think of that, as I said, something like I hired a company to do my auditing. And if the auditor came and they weren't good, I could say to the company, hey, send me a different person. You did a bad job because the company is holding the reputation, not the individual they sent. So, and then the company could say to them, hey, Grace, you didn't do a good job on that thing. We're going to retrain you, or we're going to fire you, or we're going to whatever, so that my reputation is held by that thing. And that thing also holds me in line at the same time. That's the whole concept behind verifiable community. And it's a structure that is required if you want to have shared commons. Because what happens today is if I want a bicycle share from my municipality, I want to use the shared bicycle things, I have to sign up for a bicycle share. And then I have to sign up for a library card. And then I have to sign up for whatever it is, a bus pass. And all of these are separate passes. Instead, if I belong to a group, a neighborhood community, and I could show I'm a neighborhood member, and that neighborhood is authorized to use the bicycles, then as long as I'm say I'm from that neighborhood and that neighborhood is still in good standing, I can rent the bicycle. Now, if I do damage to the bicycle, here's the quiz. You ready? Quiz, quiz, quiz. If I do damage to the bicycle, who's responsible?
Well, whatever bubble that I'm
You got it. My
coming
neighbor.
from.
Exactly. Right now, I have to give my credit card, right? And that's a big individualistic system. But now it's my bubble. And so I give this example when I talk about the bicycles. Let's say it's a neighborhood bicycle share, and you have to be a member of the neighborhood. And the bicycle share is taking, after a while, there's certain neighborhoods they don't lend people in that neighborhood. And there's one neighborhood which is the rich farts neighborhood. And in the rich farts neighborhood, their teenagers are always busting the bicycles, but they're the rich farts. So whenever their teenagers bust the bicycles, they buy a nicer one or they buy two. So the bicycle commons has a choice. They can say, we don't approve of that behavior and we don't care that you're paying for it. Or they can say, yay, money. And it's the choice of the commons to do that. And it's the choice of that neighborhood to decide how they discipline their children. And that might mean that pretty soon nobody wants to deal with them, even though they're rich, because they're polluting more, not separating their trash. I mean, I'm giving this example. I'm sure there are lots of rich people who do separate their trash and are very responsible human beings and go to church every Sunday. And, I know people of all walks of life who are nasty and all walks of life who are good. But I'm just saying in this silly example that I'm giving. But let's say that neighborhood is doing too many antisocial behaviors that the township as a whole, or because pretty soon the bicycle commons is like, you know what, it's too much of a pain with you guys. And we're getting complaints about the kids making noise on the bicycles too. And pretty soon the library's like, we don't want you in our library either. And maybe there's other places that start excluding them based on the fact that they're not doing pro-social behavior. And so now the bubbles can start to influence their neighborhoods or their region or the other organizations within I'm going to call it economic system because we're talking about economics here. You got some bicycles, you got some privileges, you got some whatever. And so that actually creates a non-coercive system in which there's complete freedom to belong to whatever bubbles you want to belong to. There's complete freedom of each bubble to decide its own rules. And there's complete freedom of who you listen to and who you provide services to. That's the basic architect. I'm going to call that architecture. That's architecture.
Amazing. So I have two questions from two different sides. One is, I'll ask them both and then you choose which order you want to respond to them. The first one is a key, the world that I float in, as you know, is a lot of like now, potential, right? What is our bubble? We haven't defined a bubble. There's groups forming. Groups are at different stages of actually having built a bubble membrane, right? And shutting it down too early, saying these are the rules, in or out, is in some cases not productive. It's good to have for a while this field of potential, and then we get more clarity, especially when we're co-creating. If there isn't a strong leader telling people what to do, but we want to figure out and co-create, then people hang on. At some point needs to be a decision making moment, but it can take time. So fuzzy bubbles or bubbles in the form of formation is one question, and the second question is the surveillance society, social credit score, and devolving into the dystopia that we fear.
Okay, so hold on just a second. I'm going to close this window because it's a little colder now. The first question, the first question you asked was about sometimes bubbles aren't formulated, or sometimes you're a lone wolf and you don't have a bubble. This system has nothing to say about it. It's agnostic. There's nothing to say about it. If you don't have a membership card, if I have a bicycle share, or let's say I have something called an event in the evening, I'm having an evening event, or I'm having a beach cleanup, and I want to invite only people who really clean up. They don't just show up with good weed. And I'm trying to give realistic examples from our community. And, you know, when I have a party, I want to invite the bubble of people with good weed. And I mean, I don't personally
No, no,
care,
I know,
sort
we
of, but
know,
yeah, right.
so we
Right.
understand. Part of
But when I'm having a beach cleanup, I only want, and I'm only gonna let you into the beach if you've got a credential from a bubble that I recognize, from a community that I recognize. If there's a community that is not well formed, they don't have a membership card, I can't invite them because they're not well formed yet. I can't trust them not to be disruptive because they aren't vouching for each other yet. Or they might start vouching for each other, right? Like, let's say there's the bicycle group, and there's a group of teenagers in the rich guy's neighborhood that they're like, listen, we want to be able to get those bicycles. We don't like our friends. We're going to vouch for ourselves. We're going to be the proper kids, whatever we're going to call ourselves, the proper kids. We want to set an example for our neighborhood. We want whatever. And they go down to the bicycle collective, and the bicycle collective says, okay, we're not going to recognize your neighborhood, but your new credential called the proper kids will be recognized until the day that anything goes wrong. We're going to give you like, you better be pristine. Life goes on, a few weeks pass, they puncture a tire. The kid who punctures the tires goes down to the bicycle collective with a inner tube and some of these, like levers, and says, "Can you teach me to fix the bicycle? Because my group promised we'd be cool." And they're like, "That's great." And they keep honoring that collective. Okay? So you can start from nothing. If whoever is offering the service will accept your credential, if you're not well formulated, it's up to whoever's offering the service. I might say, yeah, we'll accept your credential even if you don't know who your members are yet. But you might just not issue a credential, but everybody's got multiple ones, so you don't need it until the group forms. So that's just sort of like it's agnostic, right? But I wanted to give an example of how it might be that somebody starts from scratch, or in this case, these kids didn't start from scratch. They started from a negative reputation, but the bicycle collective was willing to give a second chance. Okay. And there's two kinds of privileges. One is really these kinds of actual things, economic things that you can get. It might be information. So you might have a knowledge commons or a knowledge information that can only be given to people with certain kinds of credentials because only they're responsible. But it's something that is given, a common thing. The other kind of trust is I can trust you to keep a secret, which is the Extinction Rebellion type of trust. But those are the two kind of general types of trust you're going to need in the system. And the and if the group isn't formulated, look, I can't trust you at a party. I don't know. Maybe one of your members is kind of antisocial and not safe around women. I don't know yet. Can't invite you to the party. Um, And that's totally legit. Right? Whoever's throwing the party decides. Okay. In terms of antisocial behavior, that's great. That's the next part of the architecture. So basically what you've got is what's called an acceptance network, which means I have something I'm willing to give you, right? I have a safe house, or I have a restaurant, or I have a bicycle. That's an acceptance network. And you have the issuers, that's the bubbles themselves. The communities issue a credential, and the acceptance network accepts the credential. In between, who decides which credentials are good credentials? The acceptance network could decide, in the case that I gave, the bicycle network decides, or the bicycle network could say, we are willing to accept anything that's on the mayor's list. The mayor has a list of neighborhoods. You have to be on the mayor's list. That's called a registry. None of what I'm telling you is particularly new. It's all stuff that is in the W3C standards. It's very normal for all identity systems. So I'm not inventing anything new. I'm just using those protocols to create something that is privacy preserving and avoids this centralization problem. So there's a mayor's list. The mayor issues a list of all the neighborhoods that are cool, and that's a registry. Now, there's also the religious affiliation list. The religious affiliation list only likes certain neighborhoods. They don't like all the neighborhoods. And also the religious affiliation list has all the churches. So even if you're the wrong neighborhood, but you go to the proper church, there's a list of the cool neighborhoods and a list of the churches. So that's the authority. That's another registry. In our organizations, you might say there's Vitalik's list and there's Balaji's list. Like, which network states does Balaji recognize? Which network states does the United Nations recognize? Which, right? So you can have a list of network states, or a list of neighborhoods, or a list of regenerative projects, and those lists are held by registries. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah, it sounds like just another kind of space that verifies other spaces.
That's all it is. So now what happens? I go to the shop to buy and again, none of this is new. I go to the shop to buy eggs. Some of the eggs have a fair trade stamp on them. Some of the eggs have an organic certification on them. Some of them came from the farm next door, which I've seen. Some of them say free range. Some of them say cage free. And I, as the person who accepts the eggs, decides which of those registries is the registry I trust. So there's no centralization of power, because what happens is the bicycle collective says, we don't like the mayor's list. We do like the religious list. Those people
I
are
mean,
keep their things in a row.
with the eggs, sorry, because
Yeah, with
I
the eggs.
think that's a great example because that's exactly what happens anyways, right? I look at the box and I go, is it free range? Is it organic? How much do I actually trust this brand for free range and organic to mean anything whatsoever?
That's
So
exactly right.
it's exactly, I mean,
And
I
this is
think,
normal, right? The
yeah, yeah.
organic farmers association has gone to the farms and given them and put them on the registry.
Actually, in this case, no. So there is two things. There is the government EU organic. So actually, there is room for improvement there because this is actually food is really interesting one. I've been thinking again for a long time about this, but food really misses the ability to emerge local standards or that are either higher or that are specific and get them out into the world. The government does it with, and we know the different challenges, pluses and minuses of government set standards. But besides that, nobody really manages. Individual farmers put nice stuff on the box, but there is no verification behind it other than them. So this ability to bring new standards into the world with the verification and all of this is actually a very interesting use case. And there could be a lot of worthwhile business value unlocked there, especially as in many countries, faith in the government is many countries never had faith in the government. Like this whole idea that the government is useful for anything. If you ever believe that in your life, you live in a minority, because for most people in the world, that's never been true in their lives. But even in the countries where it used to be true, for various reasons, the standards are becoming less worthwhile or meaningful. So the ability to emerge new standards, I've been thinking about this for a long time, but you need to build a brand around it and all of this. But of course, the verification, if you could have some impact verification also floating around in the bubbles, this could also be interesting.
So I'm not talking about impact verification because right now I'm talking about trusting organizations, right? But if that's again, the impact verification also comes in individualistic packages, but I'm not gonna go down that. But food is a good example because you know who has the right to tell me what I should eat. It's very clear. The government shouldn't tell me what I'm allowed to put in my body. If I want to drink raw milk or ingest that mushroom because um,
But
it's my
but
body.
but the two humans that call you mother, they get to tell you. You get to you get to tell them what.
That was a short-lived situation, but even then, if you see like the evolution of eating disorders or whatever, like, yeah, I've had toddlers. Let me tell you who decides what goes in their stomachs. From a very young age, if you're a very controlling parent, you'll find it very difficult to get your kids to eat what you want because it's the one thing that even a baby knows they control.
Yeah. Uh,
So we all know who should control what's in your mouth. And because of the problems with the way that the food system works, a lot of us no longer trust the stamps that the government gives us. And you're saying exactly the right thing. And the obvious example for me around food is kosher certification. So kosher certification, there's rabbis who go around and give factories the stamp. There are multiple different kosher certifications. You may not know this. And depending on which group of Jews you belong to, one, another, or the other one might be kosher enough for you and it might not be. And I talked to a yeast manufacturer out of Europe, and he was saying we use the same factory, but you pay per metric ton for your kosher certification. So a certain number of the packages coming off have this certification and a certain number have this certification because we pay per metric ton, but it's the same production line. Okay. But that's exactly right. And all those rabbis come and visit on different days to make sure it's kosher. And that's exactly what you want because you, as an individual, want to control what goes into your mouth and whether you believe the organic federation or the not organic federation, et cetera. So transferring that to our systems, as we talk about, okay, I want to have a beach cleanup. I want to have a commons. So let's say we're going to have a community garden. I want to have a community garden. I want to have a forest, reforestation. So let's say we decide to do some really, I had somebody actually ask me about this. What happens if we want to do some guerrilla um, syntropic forestry? We want to plant some chestnuts and some things in the forest, and it's not really allowed. And we're going to have an activity for planting some of those things that or and cutting down some of the trees around the chestnuts that are trying to grow up from the pines. And we're going to have a food forest restoration or biodiversity restoration day. Who can I trust to invite who won't tell me it's not allowed? In this particular case, they were telling me how long it takes to get permission from the Canadian government in their area. And I'm like, if it takes that long to permission, they're not going to punish you either. Go out and do your activity, right? Have a picnic in the forest. Who cares? Plant some, rogue chestnuts. Nobody's, rogue cedars, whatever you want to, who's going to stop you? But I need to know that your organization can keep a secret. And that's where I need this certificate from the organization. And if your person from your organization misbehaves, informs on us, whatever it is, you either take rehabilitative action or we stop honoring your certificates from your community. And that's where we get to scale it. And that's where we get to have stewardship of the commons. Without this type of thing, it's very hard to steward the commons because you're doing all of your provisioning individually. Like, are you a member? And then you're also doing all your enforcement individually. So let's say you've got a community garden and there's some people you got to kick out and you've got to enforce them, and you always have to be the bad guy and tell them, like, dude, you made a mess, and you don't know what that person's situation is. Like maybe they had just a death in the family or something, and so they're misbehaving for a couple of months and you didn't know it and you're not responsible for anything other than the garden. But if they belonged to a community neighborhood bubble or community, that community could say, hey, this kid's having a hard time, we'll make up for it, whatever, we know that family's been having a hard time. Let's give them a few extra vegetables, or we're not going to let that family in. We're going to revoke that family's card for a couple of months until they go through some grief activity. And so the community holds the people in the community so that the community garden isn't having to do rehabilitative work or conflict resolution work or whatever. And you could have a conflict resolution organization, which we're calling Ostrom 5, after Ostrom's principles 5 and 6. And we can talk about that too. But the idea is that the actual management of the individuals comes within a community that knows you.
I love it. Also, another thing which I think for me would be useful is have the idea, because this is something I've been wondering for a long time also, is introductions. Because this happens a lot in life, right? When I introduce you, when I introduce somebody to talk to you, I'm lending my reputation to this person, right? This
Yes.
happens a lot in this person is going to be in your town. Can you please let them stay at your house? I vouch for them, either verbally, explicitly, or it's implicit in me recommending somebody to talk to you to whatever. This is very interesting. I think it would add a lot of interesting dynamics, also reflecting things that happen in the real world. And this doing introductions in a way where the value is being recognized, not in the sense of I'm getting paid, right? There's no amount of money that me introducing somebody to talk to you would be worthwhile. It makes no sense whatsoever, right? But if I introduce somebody to you and you have a good conversation saying, yes, Victor gave me a good introduction, up one Grace Victor reputation point or something like that, that would be super useful.
I I've developed what I've developed because I don't believe that problem is solvable. I've really spent a lot of time thinking about what you're talking about, but I don't think that problem is solvable. And it's not solvable on a number of levels. Um, eh, One is that it's so subjective and it can only and like I might be like, Victor introduced me to this person, but he didn't know that guy was a bit of a misogynist because that guy talked to Victor and they're both men, right? Like you just might never know, right? That's kind of a out there example, but you get the idea, right?
It's a very fair example,
Right?
but I
Let me,
mean,
I just think it's not solvable, but let me get back to the example you gave about staying at my place. So I had somebody stay at my place. I had two guys stay at my place. One of them said, hey, I know you from this group and I know you from that group and I've seen you online. And I'm like, oh yeah, I've seen him online and we're traveling through Slovenia and da da da. And can we stay? Okay. Now, for the purpose of staying at my place, I need to know a few things. And I didn't really know exactly what all of them were, except in some cases, not this case, but in different cases where people stayed at my place, different things have come up. So far, everybody who stayed at my place has been safe and doesn't break anything, right? Some people clean up after themselves. Some people don't clean up after themselves. Some people think they've cleaned up after themselves. Some people take up too much of my time. Like they're just not respectful of the fact that I've got a job and they soak up my time. Like I'd like to spend some time with you because you're my guest and we want to get to know each other, but I also need more respect. So some people know how to meet the boundaries. Some people, so there were a whole bunch of factors in that. Okay. Now, on a one-on-one basis, this is a problem. So somebody came over at one point, was a friend of my son's, and did not adhere to all the things that I mentioned. And I said to my son, listen, your friend, I love your friend, great. Don't you ever do that. I said to my son, don't do what he did. Don't be that kind of guest. I have the right to tell my son, but I don't have the right to tell him his friend. But let me tell you, the next time that friend showed up, that friend didn't do those things anymore. Okay. That's what bubbles are about. When a community says Victor can stay at your house, it means we know Victor's trustworthy. If he does anything wrong, we as a community will tell him, do your dishes, Victor. Just like my friend told, my son told his friends, like, do that thing, that thing you did was not cool with my mom, right? And so that's what happens is that these communities recommend somebody for the specific thing to stay at your house, for example. And they might say, okay, we're sending you to America to a house. We're going to teach you how to do hospital corners. Because the Americans, they have this weird system. They don't use duvets, and you need to know how to do this. And before we send you to the America, we need to teach you how to make a bed in that particular way. And your community can do that for you. And then your community can vouch for you. And making the bed is an example for any of the other things you might need to do. So that's the difference between the group vouch and the individual vouch. Individual vouches are still going to be important always. I'm not sure it can be digitized, and I'm not sure, how to deal with that. So, for example, I have a friend who's a little neurodivergent, and she makes a lot of introductions. She's constantly introducing people, and like 1 in 20 of her introductions is good. I don't tell her stop because she's kind of neurodivergent and that's her thing. And it doesn't hurt her reputation, but I know that only 1 in 20 of her things, but I don't not check them, right? Like, it's okay, right? I wouldn't want, in that case, for example, for her to have a bad reputation as a referral person. I know several people who she refers people to, of course, because she's introduced me to some people, right? I wouldn't want to reduce her reputation as a referral person. We all know that. We said, hey, so and so introduced me. And they're like, yeah, some of her introductions, and it's okay. But in a system that you're talking about, her reputation as a referral maker might go down, even though
So
we're all cool with the situation, right? That's the situation. We're all cool with it.
so there is some interesting dynamics there. So for example, I don't know this person, so I can't speak to
You
her.
might, I don't know.
It doesn't, but it doesn't matter. I don't know
Right.
who we're talking about, so I can't speak to this concrete example. But for me, and I think most people that do introductions should care about the quality and the value that they're generating.
She does care. She's just not able to discern it.
But maybe she's not getting enough feedback. Maybe she needs more explicit and concrete feedback. Like, so going back to the example that you gave me, if I ever introduced you to somebody and because they're misogynistic or for whatever cultural and personality fit, you're not interested, I would really love to hear because that lets me adjust and further build my mental model of what is relevant to Grace and do better introductions. Also, what came to my mind is this kind of a reputation or feedback. I mean, there's, I guess, and this connects with the next one, the surveillance society hell, right? Maybe some reputation should be private, right? I don't need you to say publicly, Victor made a shitty reputation to a guy that was an asshole to me, but I would really love to hear that person.
Right. So reputation can never be public. There's an inverse relationship between how honest the reputation information is and the privacy. So, for example, I worked with some group of people, and one of the people in the group is well known and they're brilliant. And I would never work with them again for personal reasons. I'm not even not personal, but like their working style just doesn't work for me. Okay. And there are very specific things I could say about their working style. And if anybody asked me for a recommendation for this individual who I worked with, I would give them that information. Otherwise, no one will ever know this. Nobody will ever know this. There were 5 of us on the team. No one will ever know this about this person unless they ask one of us in a specific, we're thinking about hiring X. That information will never get out. Reputation is an inverse relationship to the reality of reputation. Public reputation doesn't work. It can never be publicized. It can't be aggregated. It can't be solved. And it's okay because we like talking to people. The the reputation that you have from your community is enough to kind of get you in the door. And your community takes responsibility. So again, here's kind of a crazy example. We're getting towards the end, but I guess I have to talk about the surveillance, although I'm not sure how it's relevant. But I worked for a company and I was a manager of a company where there was one guy who was a technical writer and he had come from I don't know what. He never looked anybody in the eye. He was a genius. He never took notes. He never shook people's hands because of his religious whatever. And I had some client, but he was a genius, mathematics genius. And I had a technical company, a startup that called me up, said, we need this at this deadline, blah, blah, blah. I said, I will send you somebody, but you need to know these things. First of all, he'll show up there. He won't shake anybody's hands. He won't look anybody in the eye. He won't take any notes. You'll tell him everything you have to say about the product. You'll give him a login, whatever. Then he'll go away. He'll turn off his phone for a week. You won't know what happened to him. He won't answer emails. He won't call you up. He won't answer your calls, nothing. He will disappear for a week. At the end of the week, he will send you a perfect user manual. They said, okay, we're desperate. We need it done. 2 weeks later, they called me up. They said, everything you said came true. Okay. That guy would never get a normal job, but his bubble protected him. That's right. So if you give that credential as a group, you need to say, we're sending so-and-so over to stay with you. He needs, no, 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 no. He'll freak out because he's neurodivergent if he doesn't eat exactly at 6 on the dot or whatever it is. And you'll say, look, I can handle it or I can't handle it. But the group that has sent him took responsibility. So that reputational stuff never gets surveilled. It never gets on any digital platform. It never is anywhere. It's kept as however that group decides to keep that information, it's kept. And that's one of the reasons why it doesn't need to be surveillance capitalism, because the group holds that.
So, but is it not just kind of a we built it ourselves social credit store, that whole dystopia that China is building based on Netflix episode? I don't know who was first, but
Okay, so let me talk about China first. China is scaling that down. It was never really fully implemented in the way that we've been told. That's Western propaganda. I saw some really interesting talks on that. You can look at Western researchers who've actually researched the social credit score. It was never implemented like that. It's a little bit more similar to the US credit scores for financial reasons. And they're scaling it down because they realize that it's a security risk, because anywhere you have that database, the US or any of your other enemies might break into it. So they're scaling it down dramatically because it's a security risk to hold that data. So just to like clean up that stuff, the people who are accusing the Chinese of having all this surveillance data on you, guess what? Anyway, um, guess what? They'd like you to be distracted about what might happen to you when it's already happened to you, which is how we started this conversation. The UK is picking up 60 people a day for speech crimes. Where do they know the speech crimes are happening? Online. How are they doing it? With AI, with Google ID and Facebook ID and Twitter, like this is here. It's not in China. Wake up. Mm. Okay. This system is fully decentralized because the only thing there are is registries. All the membership lists are held by the organizations. In fact, you don't even have to hold a membership list. You can issue a verifiable credential and not hold a list of who has the credentials. So all of the credentials are held by you in your wallet and potentially by the community that issued them to you, probably by the community that issued you, in no centralized database. The registries, there has to be a place where there's the registry repository, so that the registry says you can go to the registry here, and my registry is public, and it has a list of the public keys, like the list of the organizations that belong to the registry, but not a list of the members. The list of the members is there. And so the point of opening up your information is when I want the bicycle, I show you that I have a valid credential from one of the organizations. I don't have to show you my name. I don't have to show you my age like I do when I go to a bar, or my nationality. All I show you is a credential that says I belong to your network. So there's actually much more privacy and much less data and no honeypot. The data just isn't stored anywhere. The memberships aren't stored anywhere. You may be speaking, but you're on mute.
I just had a late in the game epiphany, and this is something maybe I missed it, but maybe it just needs to be explained even more explicitly. This idea that I don't need to reveal my identity to rent the bicycle, but I mean, they still need to know which one of the community rented the bicycle. If I break it, they need to go back to the community and say,
Sure,
Victor broke the bicycle.
maybe they have my public key, but not my private key. They might not know who I am. They might just have a public key.
So
Maybe they
they,
don't. Or, maybe they don't. Maybe when I rent the bicycle, that public key is sent back to my neighborhood and not to them, not to the bicycle rental. The bicycle rental doesn't know. Maybe when I show my credential, if the bicycle rental wants to make sure that they can tell who it was, that could be done technologically however you want. They don't need to know. They might get a number and it might say member number this came.
okay. So now just briefly, technologically, how far have you gotten in designing, prototyping this?
We don't have anyone to design it for. So we have very explicit specifications, but what we're looking for is one of two things. So we have some developers who are willing to do work, but they're not going to do the work unless we have an actual community that wants to adopt it. We have a number of communities that want to adopt it, but they don't have the funding for it, for the deployment, for the user training, for the customer service, for the UI design. So the people who want to adopt it don't have the money for it. The people who want to develop it won't do it without an adoption network. And so there's no point in developing it until we have a proper budget,
Yeah.
which is like 1 million or more, I think is probably right. We have very interested parties who are very interested in doing this. But I think what it would take is, first of all, because part of the problem is the acceptance network. Not many, you need a group of at least 5 or 10 communities that are sharing some commons. They might not be sharing the commons right now, or the commons themselves, like the bicycle network or the public library or the tool shed, or whatever common tools, that might be run in a different way. Like we have to actually train people. So it'll probably be done by like an online, not online, in person, like 1 day game and conference where we start to understand and experiment with it and understand how they would use it. And then we would design the user face after that. And then we would deploy it with the organizations after that. But we're not, I'm really tired of the situation in which all of us develop some code that we can never deploy. I'm not doing it. Yeah.
I hear you. That's very much what's behind my motivation around the Region OS work to create a pool of collaborators because it's also collaborating applications that use this. So create a unit that has big enough momentum to raise the money, to have the initial deployment and the wherewithal to take it into the world at large.
Yeah.
So uh,
We'll
yeah,
deploy, as soon as you get the money, come to me and we'll deploy it because you need this before you need anything else. I'm sure you'll get everybody else in the Regen OS to agree that I'm the one who gets the money first. That,
well, but it doesn't
I
matter
mean,
who gets
yes,
the money first.
yes,
What?
it does.
Okay.
It matters because the person, like, that matters because of what we're talking about. If you gave all this money first, let's say to a conflict resolution organization, because we said the biggest problem we have is conflict resolution. The conflict resolution organism would have no teeth because there's no identity to know who's in the membrane or the out of the membrane. If you gave the money first to an agricultural collective, we'd have more food, but we wouldn't know who to distribute it to. We would not be one organism. Without the membrane, we are not an organism. And then we're relying on Victor to remember everybody who's trustworthy in his head. And then our leaders burn out. We know this is what's happening.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
And I'm not saying give it to me, right? I'm saying you must have an identity solution that is like,
I
that
agree with
works.
you. I agree with you. I disagree with you that developing that by itself is a viable way to boot up this whole ecosystem.
It's not viable
We
by
need,
itself.
I don't know what the number, the minimum viable number of pieces of the mosaic are together to get the quarter of a billion raised and to move towards going into 1 billion users. I'm trying to figure out who I need in the room to help figure out what is the minimum viable number of pieces to create enough, a powerful enough story and powerful enough technologies that it really shifts. But it's more than any one solution, you know. It's not just decision making, it's not just identity, it's not just social, it's
Right,
not just value accounting.
but I
It's
don't trust me either, right? Only thing that I can do right now is deploy at a small level. Like, don't give me a large amount of money. A couple of million, that's it, because this might not work. It's an experiment. And I think everything that we've got is an experiment. There's nothing that should be deployed at scale at this point. Nothing. We don't have anything that works.
Yes, and I don't think anything can be deployed at scale. None of the pieces can be deployed at scale as individual solutions. There needs to be an ecosystem of solutions.
None of them can be deployed at scale at all because we don't know if they work in a small scale. None of them have a pilot yet. And so I don't think it matters what pieces you're going to try and implement. It has to be a little more random than that. Like, it's arrogant to think that we know what needs to be deployed. I don't know. How am I ever going to figure that out? Like, I'm really smart and I've written down what
But
I think
no,
needs to be
but we
deployed.
can look at the meta level, look at the last 30 years of development of alternative software and solutions, look at how ecosystems work and come up with some hypotheses. And my
Right.
hypothesis from watching this space for 30 years is that it's more than just one solution.
Mine too.
And it needs to be, yes, you need to start small, but if all anybody is ever doing is funding small pilots with a few tens of thousand or a couple 100,000 crowdfunded from friends, then it's not going to shift the world.
I
And so,
agree.
cool.
But what I'm saying is that I have a hypothesis about what the fabric is. Okay. And I have three or four projects that I think need to be in that fabric. And I want to combine them with a bunch of little projects that are actually growing food and doing actual real services on the ground, right? So I have a hypothesis on how to start. I have a hypothesis. Do you agree with my hypothesis? It's one of five. What if we had five different hypotheses that fit into your Regen OS idea, not a consensus on it, but five different hypotheses, each of which could be funded at 20 million or less, because it's just a hypothesis for a regional network. It has to be regional. It can't be individual anymore, because that's what you're saying. And we have five of these
No, wait, I
hypotheses.
never said I'm not a regionalism guy. Not
What
when
is,
it comes to.
how do you know that this will scale? Because we have thousands of small community efforts. How do you know it will scale?
So software scales, software functions differently, but even everything, you know, there's kebabs everywhere. People grow
Okay.
food everywhere. It's all variations on a theme. And Mediterranean climate is here, it's in California, it's in Turkey. So there's actually more similarities than many people appreciate. But I think we're going off topic of today's
I don't think we are
conversation.
because I'm not interested in software. I'm interested in people and the environment. And the software has to serve this. And connecting a digital network has like almost zero interest for me because we can't form a society without food and water. And you and I have talked about this. And so, what these systems have to experiment in, can we create a network of people who provide each other with their needs? Other, or a network of people who restore the environment. Otherwise, I'm not interested. Like, you might be interested, but I'm not.
So from my sitting around this world 10 years and having spending too many dinners at regenerative, uh, hanging out with my regenerative designer friends, my sensing is that when it comes to food, water, and those things, most of the ideas are out there. What they're
Yep.
missing is the ability to scale it
Yep.
at global scale.
They don't even know how to scale it at regional scale. I agree with you. They can't
And
scale it
and that's
globally.
and that's why I think digital tools, which when they work well, are great at scaling ideas around the world, are a key unlock
I
for actually
agree.
getting local food, getting,
I
local clean
agree.
water, for me, finding somebody to help me clean up the river from all the
Yes.
junk that's going
Yes.
there. So,
We agree.
uh,
The only thing that I am pointing at is saying try it first in a region and see if it works regionally before you scale it nationally. Don't try to scale things across borders until you know that you've created software that works in one region. Because right now, like you said, the water solutions are the, but like the forestry experts aren't connected to the water expert, aren't connected to the agriculture experts in a region. So what I'm pointing at is try out the software at a small scale. And don't try out the software with the water expert in Italy and the forest expert in Spain. That's weird. Try it in a coherent region. And then, if the software works in a coherent region, then scale it to the next region and the next region. And so that's what I'm saying. You don't need one hypothesis about what will scale over the world. You need five hypotheses about what would cohere a region. You need to try each of those five in different regions and see what works. That's what I'm saying, because I am afraid that I'm wrong. And I want to try it out in a region before I say, oh, I'm going to scale it all over the planet.
so I disagree.
Okay.
It's depth versus breadth. I think from software and from running software, I think you should try it in 10, in 20 communities around the world, trying to convert a whole region, which is already stuck in a national matrix or multiple national matrix. Anything that touches the land takes decades.
Okay.
So trying to convert the whole region, and also really, I think in some ways, I think I hope we agree, we need a stack of solutions, right? So maybe we just develop a system that helps water experts in Italy, in Spain, in the US, in Africa, and scale that around the world. And it's just one piece of the thing. But for example, with the gathering, right? I'm not spending 10 years growing it to thousands of people in Portugal like some people would do before spreading it. I'm spreading it to many countries as it's growing in each country. And that gives a different form of learning. I'm not saying it's the only way, but if you want something to go global, actually, there is the possibility to start global now and share the learnings already globally. But, anyways,
I think that's great. Like we know where we disagree, and now I know why I will not join Regen OS because I disagree with your hypothesis. My hypothesis is that it must be regional, and your hypothesis is that it must be global, and therefore the operating system that I would develop is completely different than the one that you would develop.
I'm talking about this strategy of developing software. I think
Yeah.
developing regional software is a really strange idea.
Okay. I think the idea that I know how to govern the planet is so arrogant that even I can't do it. And I'm really arrogant. Like, I can't do it. I can't do it.
Where
It's
did you
just
jump to governing the planet?
because you're like, we need to do this planetary thing. And I'm like, no, I don't know if it'll work. Look, I'm really trying to create an alternative system to the default system, right? Like, and the default system includes our economic system, and it includes our agricultural system, and it includes our water systems, and it includes our forestry systems, and it includes the financial systems. It includes all of that. I can't demonstrate that on a planetary level because these are interlocking pieces. They all interlock, including that the food goes into my mouth. And so if I can't get them to interlock in a regional level, I don't see the meaning of getting, like, I don't see the meaning of software in the function. Like, if I want to get out of the default system, I need all my needs met, just my body. And if I can't get those needs met, I'm still in the existing system. That's what I'm trying to point at. I don't see how a farm in one place and a windmill in another place will ever get to feeding one individual's needs. Community needs can only be met locally. And I know people who are trying to do that, and I'm trying to help them. But it's like really ridiculous. They have to use money. They always have to use money because the transport, and they have to use complicated transport systems, and they have to use the existing roads. And if you have to use the existing roads, you haven't created any self-sufficiency. You're just like, I'm piggybacking and parasiting on the existing system and pretending that I have a system. Anyway, I don't want to go too far over time, but my hypothesis is that I need to create a system that can at least support a number of bodies within that enclosed system. And I can't do that globally. I can only do that with the physical resources. That's my hypothesis, is that I can't get my electricity from way over there. And that's part of the system I need to create.
But you can get the knowledge of how to set up your local
Yeah,
solar.
but I know, but that's easy to get. There's no barrier to my getting all the knowledge. The software systems and the systems that you're talking about, and like we have solved those problems. So what are you creating? Just a knowledge base? That means that what you want to create is
No,
just a train.
none of the
What are
digital
you
problems,
creating?
none of the digital problems I have been solved. I mean, you just described identity
What
theft,
is the
which is
right, but
completely not solved.
identity, the system for identity can only work if it gets me the services I needed. If I have an identity system which has a separate, like all these credentials that I talked about, but there's no bicycle share in my neighborhood, it's over there in Italy, my credential's useless. It's useless because I can't even get a bicycle with it.
Well, I mean, if it allows you to walk into a red room in New York, like your reputation system does,
Yeah,
it is useful for some things in some contexts.
right. But if those things are not things that I need to replace the things that I'm buying from the petrodollar, I haven't created anything. I'm trying to create a system that replaces my dependence on the petrodollar.
So, how do you make a phone which requires elements from 80 countries or something?
That's a very good question. And that might be the last thing we replace. And it might require much more repurposing than mining. Like in this system, we might use phones a lot less and we might use computers a lot less. I don't know. But that might be the last thing. And I hate to tell you this, but I don't have a physiological need for a phone. It's not a physiological need.
Well, I mean, I spend 98% or 95% of my time not fulfilling my physiological needs. By the way, you'll be happy to know this shirt was
Yes.
made locally, linen bought online. I found it is a bloody pain in the ass to find a seamstress, but I managed to get her, and she copied another shirt another woman made for me. So I'm doing my local purchases thing. I think a lot of that is actually culture based, right? The fact that I chose to spend 60 euros and an inordinate amount of pain in the ass going back and forth to get a shirt made is a cultural thing. Uh, but yeah, I
Right.
I think I am definitely of the mind that software needs to be developed for global uses and with people around the world. But we'll see how local software
My
develops.
I'm saying that local software cannot solve the problem of a regenerative future because a regenerative future has to do with our relationship to the land. It's the
I
soft the
disagree. I disagree. It's much more than our relationship to the land. It's our relationship to each other. It's our relationship to spirit. And
those
our
are yeah.
relationship to the land is a manifestation of our relationship to the spirit, God,
I
eternal, whatever.
I would say those three things are inseparable. It's right relationship. Land, spirit, each other. I think those are all the same thing. And I don't think software can solve that problem. I think we need to be in relation to the people near us and the land and God, and that can't be solved by software.
I think software can help us scale our right
Of
relationship.
course, I agree with that. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Can we
And
end here now? We're in agreement.
yes, all right, let's do that.
Thank you. I love you, Grace, by the way. Thanks
Oh,
so much.
great. Love you too.